Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info, and we sure saw something tonight in Daytona. Coming at you from the conclusion of the Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona, the playoff cutoff for the NASCAR Cup Series, a rare doubleheader with the Xfinity Series race after the first 20 laps on Friday night. So we got to have that this morning. So a lot of things to certainly talk about in the aftermath. Of course, who has now made it into the playoffs, who has not, and I think one of the biggest stories to really take from this race, who nearly did. Quite a lot of people, I'm sure, could lay claim to that after what we saw in the race here so far. So. Yeah, definitely. I would have to agree. Yeah, I don't think this race is going back to the 4th of July, although it brought the weather with it. Again, moving the race from the rainy season to the hurricane season, I think is still kind of absurd. But yeah, I think in terms of as long as we're going to have this playoff system, this race is always going to be the cutoff race for the playoffs. I don't see them changing that, absent a particularly large change of strategy by NASCAR. I think, quite honestly, the higher ups in NASCAR probably got exactly what they wanted out of this, and really, I think by a large extent, a lot of us did, at least for the first part of it. I think in the Cup Series race, we saw some of the best super speedway racing that we've seen in a couple of years. Certainly, a nice change of pace after the February race where we had the wreck so early in the event, the big pile up, and people just kind of waiting until the end of the race there, more or less, and not really having any other choice because there weren't that many cars out there. In this one, very low attrition outside of a few outliers that we'll certainly talk about because this is, of course, the LastCar live stream here. But really competitive racing and a lot of wrecks that probably in any other set of circumstances would have happened that did not. Many close calls. It seemed like several involving Ross Chastain in particular during the early stages of this race. There were several times that he was getting sideways or people would stack up the entrance to turn 3 or coming into turn 1, some of the faster points of the track. We saw it at kind of a different level of competition in that sense. But, at the same time, as we all know, in these super speedway races, things bubble over at some point. And if it's not going to be pit stops or anything like that, it's going to be just multiple wrecks, overtime restarts, and it just field clearing pileups. By the time it got to Chase Elliott's wreck, which was Chase Elliott's wreck, quite honestly, in that thing at the end there with Matt DiBenedetto. They were just large field clearing things that were just getting everybody involved, and we ended up with basically 2 cars crossing the line under power, 3 if you count Kevin Harvick's after the damage that he had there. So a lot you can certainly talk about from that. We'll certainly talk about the great runs that several drivers had, where apparently NBC did not interview BJ McLeod. I'm seeing on Twitter here. I don't know if they interviewed Josh Bilicki, but they should have as well with the great run that he had there, the number 52 car, for all the problems that Rick Ware's team had that kind of started all of this towards the end with the wreck as the leaders were lapping him. But I think really everything up until the wreck that had the Rick Ware drivers involved in it, I think we had one of the best summer races here in quite some time. They were playing the 2001 race, which of course is famous for, reasons well beyond the racing itself. Of course, Dale Jr.'s win in July of 2001. But, again, different aero package, different sound of the engines. But with this one here, with the Gen 6 car now on the way out here for the next gen car next year, kind of reminded me a bit of that in 2001 and also 2007 with a great run that Jimmy McMurray and Kyle Busch had as a photo finish at the finish of that race. In what was the last race at Daytona with the super speedway cars they had of the Dale Jr. era. But unfortunately, in those cases, those races actually got to go to the finish and have pretty close finishes with a lot of cars still intact. Today's race was certainly not that case. You had the major pileups at the end of the event and ultimately a pretty big mess for people to sort out there. There's certainly some positives to take from it at the same time there, but I hope that a lot of the negatives that unfortunately seemingly inevitably happen at the end of these super speedways do not take away from really what I thought was a very solid race here. Even the Xfinity race today I thought was decent. It may not have been the most wild event that we've seen there. But again, a nice change of pace there in spite of the team orders that ended up becoming the big story in that one too. And we'll certainly talk about that. We'll lead off with the Cup Series discussion as we always do, and we'll go back into the Xfinity Series at the same time here. But again, thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to make sure we jump into all kinds of discussions here from tonight's race. I think in the super speedway races, and we've had this really in a lot of the past shows here too. Who do you feel the who do you feel the worst for at the end of this in terms of drivers that seemingly had a chance to really escape a lot of these wrecks unscathed, may have had a real outside chance at a win? As NASCAR man pointed out earlier tonight, the most lead changes in this event since 2011, and that was well before the race actually ended. So a crazy set of circumstances here. Ultimately, the winner, Ryan Blaney, unofficially, who was your last place finisher of this race, if I recall, just a couple years ago in that same body armor paint scheme. But things turn on their head. But in terms of who you feel really bad for, well, certainly Corey LaJoie had a great run there. Looked like he had a real good shot at pulling off a win there down the back straightaway. Just couldn't avoid the wreck there towards the end in turns 3 and 4. Got pinched into the outside wall. Ended his day. Got a feel for him here. The July race in the last few years, even he was driving for Go Fast Racing, he'd had some really good runs, even with BK Racing. If I remember correctly, his first top 10 that he had in the Cup Series was actually driving for BK Racing, and we saw more of that tonight. Remember as well that during the February's Daytona 500, he actually avoided a lot of the accidents and had a fast car in qualifying, which got him a top 10 in the race, as well as then teammate Jamie McMurray, of course, Justin Haley back in the 77 tonight. And Haley himself having a good run and avoiding a lot of it. But Corey LaJoie, one of the best career runs we've seen out of him, seemed like he really had a chance at it even before the wrecks. I think a lot of these super speedways, you can look at it and say, well, this guy probably wouldn't have been up there if it weren't for all these wrecks. But we saw Corey in and out of the top 10 for most of this event. And I think if there was a Goodies Headache Award, as they used to have for drivers that had terrible luck towards the end of the race, he would pretty much be a pretty good candidate for it. Others you have to look at, certainly Matt DiBenedetto, while he was not a factor for most of the night, seemed like he had the right strategy when the caution came out after the Fords had pitted and the Chevys and Toyotas decided to have their own little staring competition as to who was going to pit first, which ultimately ended up moot after the Rick Ware accident. DiBenedetto was right up there where he needed to be. Unfortunately, Chase Elliott was there as well and saw fit to completely break loose and throw all these blocks and put himself in the wall. Now, a racing incident is a racing incident, and I do think that was the case here. But again, I think back to all the people who were questioning why I said that Chase Elliott is one of the most aggressive blockers out there in the super speedways. And I do point this out, one of the most serious offenders of it. Obviously, Joey Logano exists. Obviously, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. exists. But somebody has to be in third place in that. And I would make a pretty good case that Chase Elliott's in that category. Not to say that that's always a bad thing. And certainly he's had a much better career even more happening in his earlier part of his career, even than Joey Logano had at this point in his career. So it's not a commentary on statistics or anything. But I was very disappointed by how that played out there at the end. You could say one thing or another about, okay, the desperation of these drivers having to do whatever they wanted. But Chase Elliott was already in the playoffs. He was just racing for just trying to win the race. And okay, fine. Easy for me to, call into question, me sitting here in this yellow chair when he's out there trying to win in Daytona. But still a little bit of a shocking lapse there in that corner to cause that accident. And, he and the 21 just not able to get unhooked, taking him out of the race there. Just a heartbreaker on that sense. Now, again, we've seen many examples of drivers dropping to the back of the field and not being able to be a factor in the race and then ultimately taking too long. Other people staying at the front of the field and then something else happens, they get taken out. There's no clear restrictor plate strategy out of there. And what we saw out of both Corey LaJoie and DiBenedetto were kind of two different ends of it. Ultimately, two drivers that did not make the playoffs and got eliminated in there. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was my fantasy pick this week, so I was paying particularly special attention to him in this one. I thought had one of the best cars that he's had all year. Certainly the Bristol Dirt race, he was good. Nashville, if I remember correctly, I think he was pretty decent in the 600, unless I'm remembering that wrong. But certainly good to see. Seems like what Stenhouse's trick is if he doesn't get involved in a very early accident, as he has in a couple Talladega races recently. He's pretty much on track to have a good performance out there on these super speedways. And well past the second stage, he was in the top 5 there, actually trying to get a good run. I do think it was a bit of a mistake to not take tires towards the end of that. He got dropped back into the sucker hole there, and that was when he got put in the middle of all these maelstroms that ended up happening, including, of course, the Chase Elliott wreck, which ended up sending him into the inside wall. Unofficially, I think he actually finished ahead of a number of the other competitors, shows him in the 23rd spot here, which is more than many other drivers can say at the same time. Other competitors that really had a good shot at it, of course, Ross Chastain. Now, we think about Chastain at Daytona in particular, you think about the run in the 77 car where he was making a ridiculous bonsai move for the lead with Spire Motorsports, causing a big accident, took Joey Logano and other competitors out towards the end of, I believe it was a Daytona 500 at the time. But really having a great performance out there and able to kind of fall back and reassume the lead. And again, another commentary on how many lead changes we really had in that case. Good to see the 42 up there trying to make a push to get that team into the playoffs for the first time since the 42 team is now going to shut down essentially at the end of the year. Although, of course, continuing on with its charter in one shape or form. But the number 42 team at the Ganassi effort, just like the number 1 with Kurt Busch, now going to be a thing of the past after the end of this season. But unfortunately, only one Ganassi car in the top 16. Thankfully, Kurt Busch got that win at Atlanta, that he was able to punch his ticket and not have to rely on the absolute insanity that happened in the last portion of this event this time around. Let's see. But yeah, really an unfortunate situation with a lot of these drivers. But again, I don't want to be too entirely negative on this because I think there was a great race for most of this. And especially the super speedways, that's been increasingly rare. We've talked a lot about on this show the last couple of weeks here about the officiating. And well, I guess we had another story about that this week. But relating to off-track things this time around rather than the on-track. So it was a nice change. Well, not nice, but well, we'll park that aside for now. But, a different situation from the Indianapolis race where we had just complete chaos over the rumble strips there and cars getting the floor pans ripped out of them. The incident in New Hampshire with the rain, the incident at Coda with the rain and the fog and everything. It was nice to see a cleaner race this time around and really seeing the drivers being able to kind of work strategy out. And ultimately, we were going to see a very interesting strategy towards the end. I still don't entirely understand what the Chevy and Toyota teams were thinking about waiting that long. It seemed like they were determined to lap the Ford teams, if that was the case, because they were gaining on them there and then being able to pit after that. But again, the race, it would be so close to the finish of the race. I'm not sure how that would have worked out. It would have been interesting to see if that played out naturally. But of course, what ended up happening is you had other fields that break off. We saw this back even in February when we had fewer cars out there. The few Rick Ware cars, for example, kind of locked up in their own little pack. And we saw that again tonight. They were actually locked up with other drivers like Quinn Houff and so forth. And ultimately, that's where the caution ended up being caused. It would have been interesting to see how that would have worked out. I'm not sure if that would have paid off for the Chevys or the Toyotas, if it would have helped the Fords more. It seemed like we still had a pretty jumbled up lineup by the time the race restarted anyway. So I'm not sure if it really benefited anyone ultimately. Certainly Chris Buescher, who was another one you could certainly look at that was very close to kind of pulling something off here. Much like DiBenedetto, we didn't really see much out of him most of the day, but kept his nose clean and was getting up there and seemed to be able to retake the lead on a couple of occasions there at the end. It seemed like he was actually going to be able to drive Stenhouse's old ride to actually get the victory there, especially after the extension from Fifth Third Bank as a sponsor of the number 17 team. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him, but he ends up with the car actually in one piece at least and finishing second unofficially to Ryan Blaney, pending, of course, post-race inspection. Then, of course, we haven't even talked about the last place battle, which was unusual in its own right. Of course, Anthony Alfredo, one of the many drivers that had issues in technical inspections sent to the back of the field, along with his teammate Michael McDowell. And McDowell, of course, 34 last place finishes, same as his car number, before he had his win in the Daytona 500 this year. Looking to be the first driver, not the first driver since Bobby Allison anymore. Jimmy Johnson, I believe, swept both Daytona wins in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. But looking to join that list. It's a very short list. ends up joining a very different list, unfortunately. After engine failure, apparently under caution, the engine lets go, comes down pit road, it goes behind the wall, and that's it for him during the day. Ends up getting his 35th last place finish unofficially and becomes the first driver since Cale Yarborough in 1983 to win the Daytona 500 and finish last in summer speed weeks in the same year. Pretty amazing. In Yarborough's case, he actually won the pole back then and completed 5 laps before the engine let go in that case, too. Engine failure ultimately being the cause of both of these, again, unofficially pending the results of post-race inspection, which, seems like it's still a big issue through this entire weekend. But yeah, McDowell, unfortunately, in the last place spot. It's too bad for him on that. They had a nice looking paint scheme, too. It seemed like in his career, he much like Corey LaJoie, had better runs in the 400 than the 500. Just didn't quite shake out for him this time around. And hopefully things shake out better for him going down the stretch here into the playoffs, where he now has to worry about making it through the round of 16 to the round of 12. And we'll certainly get into that as we get into Darlington next week for the Southern 500 and so forth. But that'll be interesting in its own right. Joey Logano had a great run, one of the best that we've seen out of him pretty much most of this year. Whereas even though his teammate Ryan Blaney pulled off the victory seemingly out of nowhere, really, at some point, and Brad Keselowski was kind of out to lunch for most of this race, although he seemed to get up to the front just in time to get in the same wrecks as everybody else did. Logano had a very good race out there. I guess they had at least 2 good Daytona cars after the one that he completely wadded up in February in that ridiculous wreck into turn 3 that ultimately did hand McDowell the win in the 500. I know that people aren't huge fans of Logano in general, but it looked like he had one of the cars to beat. Chase Elliott seemed like he was the best at the beginning of the race. Logano kind of supplanted him there. Other drivers were able to kind of stay in the top 5 again, kind of like Stenhouse, kind of like Bubba Wallace, really. Denny Hamlin, other competitors to that sense. A lot of drivers had a factor, but it wasn't a complete crapshoot. There was a whole section of the field that we really didn't see much of anything out of the entire day. In some cases, that really benefited some drivers. BJ McLeod, again, congratulations on the 10th place finish. The Live Fast Motorsports team finishes ahead of both 23. Well, hang on, let me hold off on that. Not 23-11, but finishes ahead of Trackhouse this time around. Bubba Wallace unofficially in the 3rd spot. Great run for him, of course, after coming very close to winning this race last year. But BJ McLeod, the 10th place finish, right behind Chase Elliott and right ahead of Josh Bilicki in the running order. A couple of underdogs in Fords with some very interesting performances there. Ryan Preece has consistently been a surprise in these super speedways. Had the fastest open car by far back in February. I don't know if he drove the same car in this race or not, but it certainly drove the way that it did. Overcoming damage after Denny Hamlin ran in the back of him. Seemed like it was going to be a serious issue. Not serious enough to not get a 5th place finish out of it there. So kudos to him, especially after the problems that his teammate Stenhouse had towards the end of the event. Alex Bowman spun out, ends up finishing in the 8th spot. Suarez, mentioned him, seemed like he was going to have the move of the race at the end. Ends up getting hooked by Kurt Busch into the pileup with Kevin Harvick. And it was just on from there into turn 3, and NASCAR threw the caution. At that point, it was pretty much academic anyway. Ordinarily, I'm not crazy about races finishing under caution, but when you basically just had, Chris Buescher several car lengths behind Ryan Blaney clearing that wreck, it probably wasn't going to change anything between then and the middle of the tri-oval. So in that case, decent officiating on that end. Yeah, no, I certainly don't think anybody's going to accuse Joey Logano of not being a really aggressive driver. I think Amp Lemon, captured that perfectly in his video not too long ago here for sure. Liam Urvig, thank you for your super chat there. Brandon Brown had a hot rod today. I almost said hot dog. I'm having hot dog for dinner tonight. Hot rod today. Absolutely, he did. And we'll certainly talk about that more in the Xfinity portion, but we'll jump into that right now with the 68 car. Great run for him there. We've seen a lot of great runs out of him in spite of a lot of different situations where the team has struggled for sponsorship. Struggled to try to even make the playoffs and looking to get the best runs they possibly can. Looked like they had a really good shot at it today, actually being able to, again, much like a lot of the competitors we saw earlier tonight, able to lose a lead and retake it again multiple times. Seemed like everybody in the booth was just kind of waiting for him to get out of the way when the colleague guys got up there, but they had to really kind of fight for it to take the lead from him. And in spite of the very nice and smoothly coordinated effort that the 3 colleague cars had, Brandon Brown was doing a great job just by himself. So kudos to the 68 team. I hate that they ran out of fuel and lost multiple laps, dropping him further back in the order because the results aren't going to show how good he actually looked in that race. But at other super speedways and other races going forward, that's going to be one driver to certainly look at. Thank you, the Judo Joker, for your super chat as well. Isn't it ironic that they made a point system that prioritizes winning, yet they spend so much time gushing over point standings for winless drivers? Exactly. There's so many contradictions in this current point system, and if it's going to work out one way or the other, they seem to want tight racing, but they're just creating situations where drivers are going to be even more aggressive than they already were. I always think it's kind of strange that they create these incentives where drivers, almost to put forward the argument that they're not racing hard enough when they clearly are. And you get a race like this where it just bubbles over. And after a really nice, competitive, very heated race for much of the distance, it just bubbles over and you get the whole series of cautions and big pileups that we're so accustomed to in super speedway racing anymore. But yeah, it's interesting that, the focus then shifts to these winless drivers. Almost becomes more like the Winston Open in that sense, which I've always been a big fan of in the series. Kind of doing a hooligan race of drivers that haven't won yet or haven't won in years and seeing who's the best of the rest, basically. It's one of the big reasons we did the Texas coverage this year, to kind of see that in person. And so we got to see guys like Ross Chastain or Eric Almirola and others kind of be able to compete for that. But yeah, it's interesting. It almost seems like they have to have a complete gear change in the broadcast booth where they're finally talking about these guys like Stenhouse, like Reddick, like Dillon, like DiBenedetto. They've touched on a number of these drivers here and there when they've had good runs. We've seen DiBenedetto do good at Road America, Stenhouse again at the Bristol Dirt Race in Nashville. And of course, the Childress guys have kind of been in and out of everything lately, especially back at Michigan, where Dillon seemed to have the best piece in the field, only to ultimately get taken out of that race. And then this ended up being costly here, where Reddick ends up defending the spot despite serious damage of his own in this case. So interesting how it all shakes out. I do think at the same time, though, again, I go back to what I said earlier. I don't think we're ever going back to Richmond for the playoff cutoff. I think as long as they keep the playoffs in here, they'll certainly keep Daytona as the cutoff race there, if not Talladega. The only reason I would think that they would even try to change anything is they would try to make it even bigger than it already was. I'm not sure if they're really going to do that, though, because I think they're already getting the results that they want out of this. And you already have this summer date that was already in existence for the Daytona race. They're just moving it a month later to do this. So you kind of have that too. Oh, Rob F, man, Robin Miller. He's a whole other person out there too, and Godspeed to him too. I mean, obviously, I don't want to get things too sad in here with everything, but it must be said, of course. Condolences to the family and friends and fans of Robin Miller. Tremendous figure in not just open wheel racing, but motorsports in general, and just being unflappable in things that he likes and doesn't like. And just, again, I've always been very respectful I very much admire people that have cut a complete corner of existence out just for themselves, where you can't imagine anybody else doing what they did. And Robin Miller certainly fits in that circumstance. I wish I would have talked to him in the media center at Sears Point that last year. He was just a couple rows behind me there, and I saw him. I think we maybe, I don't think we shared 2 words or anything like that, but the man stands out. He was always, and this is just a couple of years ago, he was just as hard working as anybody else out there, working the garage area and going in and out and talking to these people and everything. And yeah, on the heels of so much that's happened these last couple of weeks, even if we're just talking about the motorsports community, I mean, everything beyond that is even more than that. But yeah, the passing with Bob Jenkins, Imogene McDuffie, others, and then of course Robin Miller now on top of that. As I said the other day, there's a lot of we're losing a lot of the greats out there, and hopefully, the question is really not who's going to take their place, but if anybody ever will be able to. There's a lot of good people out there that are creating some great content and all that. But they're gonna have to, I think a lot of them are gonna have to blaze their own path, really. You'd like to believe that I'd like to believe certainly that, there's enough inspiration that you can take from a lot of people out there. I personally take a lot of inspiration from Bob Jenkins. And that one still, bothers me a bit. I do want to mention while I'm saying this here that at NBC, I really appreciate them putting a lot of Bob's most famous calls in these lead ups. As much as I do think they do sensationalize the wrecks entirely too much, I certainly see it in this case in particular, where, one of the most famous calls that Bob Jenkins did at Daytona, that one about the tremendous accident, the terrific accident, I believe was his words, the big pileup that happened at the end of the first lap of the 1990 Pepsi 400, where Greg Sachs, Richard Petty, and Derek Cope actually triggered the massive pileup exiting the tri-oval that eliminated pretty much everybody out of the field. If you imagine the big wreck that we had in the Daytona 500 this year, just imagine at the end of the first lap where you don't even know who's good and who isn't. That was certainly the case back then. Phil Duffy, that I did a feature on a while back, started basically next to last in that field and still had to drive through the grass to avoid that one. That was how big of a pileup that wreck turned out to be. The last place starter actually still piled into it. So Daytona, and again, I think that kind of leads also to kind of where this event is still going to be kind of given its spot in the playoffs, as long as you have a playoff system. I do hope that hopefully, and I do think there's probably going to be a time where the sport's going to have to kind of reduce the schedule or reel things in a bit. And maybe they'll kind of look at the playoff system again and not have that in there. Maybe it'll just kind of outlive its usefulness, and we'll just have a schedule that's a little bit easier to get your hand around. And you actually have people, whoever gets the most points at the end of the season wins. We go back to something like that. But I don't know. I see a race like this today, and it always puts me in two minds of it, because again, I really enjoy the competitiveness of it, but I'm not a big fan of all the pileups at the end and just the ridiculous over the top stuff at the end, and the constant. And I have to say, as partial as this certainly is, I'm not crazy about seeing all these underdog guys being able to get up there when they have a big wreck, and then it's seemingly one at a time they all get picked off still. Like they miss the big wreck. They do all the right moves. They get all the right strategy. They get up there, and then they still just get picked off. Like one here, one there, one. And I've seen this so many times, and I can't help but get my hopes up just a little bit. It's like, wow, Corey LaJoie might win this. I still have to think about it. It's like, wow, Corey LaJoie could maybe win this. Wow, Daniel Suarez can maybe win this. Wow, Bubba Wallace might win this. Now, luckily, Wallace made it through, but Suarez and LaJoie certainly didn't. And it's like, oh, fell for it again, and that's where we are with this. But is it going to be different with the next gen car? Is it going to be worse? I don't know. None of us know, but it'll be interesting in February to find out. But we got a lot of racing to figure out between now and then. On the subject of racing coming up, I also want to mention at this point here some good news. That my credentials were approved for Las Vegas at the end of September. So big thanks to the folks over at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This will be my first time covering the action. This will be for the South Point 400 weekend. There is still time to get on the door magnet that we're going to have on a rental car for the drive down there. We're going to be driving this time for that, since it's obviously closer to home here. And I'll have some more information on that on the Twitter and so forth here. But very pleased and very thankful, of course, to the staff there at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway for bringing me on board. And now it'll be another track that we can take off our list that we haven't done yet. And we'll do that at the end of this September. So we'll have some more details on that very soon, as we're now coming down the stretch there. Thank you again. Oh, goodness. Thank you for the super chat there, Beast of Metal. You didn't have to, but I appreciate it. There's also the irony of pushing the anyone could win narrative around the format when, since the introduction of the playoff points, no driver has appeared in the Final Four ranked below sixth going into the first round. A very good point. I think this is one thing that really goes back to the very roots of the playoff format in general, back when it was the chase. A lot gets talked about it with, of course, Jeremy Mayfield's last-minute run, getting into the playoffs, and beating Jimmy McMurray for the spot, and how great that was. Forgetting, of course, that Mayfield, unfortunately, despite having several good runs in 2004, including several close calls that he should have won Pocono that year, should have won Dover, should have won a number of events, but ultimately had to win the 26th race of the season to get in there. And then, unfortunately, pretty much falls out of contention at the beginning. Now, of course, you didn't have elimination rounds back then, but the fact remains, driver that comes in there at the last second, it's a great story, but ultimately, is it really going to be somebody that's going to be a factor in the playoff, as you mentioned, Beast of Metal? certainly the case. You have drivers that come in there at the last second, and I think a lot of people, kind of like when you look at playoff teams in football or postseason teams in baseball, it's like, oh, well, this person will get knocked out the divisional round, or this person will get knocked out in the wild card game, or whatever the thing is that's going to be. I'm not much of a stick and ball guy, but I think that NASCAR certainly had their share of those. If somebody like Matt DiBenedetto or Ricky Stenhouse got in there, would they have made it very far? Kind of hard to say, especially making it to the championship four under the current system. It's now even harder to get to that final four, but arguably even easier to even get one of those sweet playoff hats that you get to wear during the interviews by getting 16 people in the field. There's only 36 drivers that actually have charters, and we have most often had 36 to 37 car fields this year. This weekend was a very rare 40 car field out there, and I think it'd be hard to argue that much more than a regular 15, 20 different drivers actually had a factor in winning even this race, as competitive as it was. And when you talk about championships, it's a whole other league from there, especially by throwing in all these other venues like Talladega and the Roval and all this other crazy stuff in there. Knowing there's only going to be 4 drivers and a very short Phoenix race that's going to determine the championship, where you can't really make any mistakes. And you can have a great season and have it completely come apart at that last moment. Think to Brad Keselowski last year, where he seemed like he was going to have a good shot at it. One bad pit stop, one bit of strategy there, and it's all Chase Elliott all day there at the end. So it's a tough call on there, but yeah, that would be kind of the situation. But yeah, but no, it's it's a lot to kind of go with on that there, but it's a tough situation there. So yeah, I mean, I hate it for Corey LaJoie. I hate it for a lot of these different competitors there. I can't help but, again, unless one of them actually wins, that definitely softens the blow of it. But again, especially in this race, when you just see those 2 cars coming out of turn 4 and there's just like nobody left, it's just like, man, like this is just completely gone out of control. And it's such a bad break, because you watched the 2001 Pepsi 400 and you had a massive field of cars. And even though Dale Jr. was head and shoulders above everybody else, and they just had like a great car that weekend, and a great teammate, Michael Waltrip, keeping behind him, they all made it through that whole race. And you had a large part of the field actually finish under power. Certainly had some accidents. You had some wrecks coming to pit road. But even on a much rougher Daytona surface with a very different aero package, where cars were, again, very close together from slowing them down, you still had a pretty good race towards the end. So it's too bad. Hopefully we'll see something better at Talladega. Hopefully we see more of what we saw the first part of this race in Talladega. Not holding my breath on that. White Knuckle Weekend has really been a complete mess. Just look at last year with the Benedetto and Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott fiasco there coming out of turn 4. Yeah, but we'll see what happens. But that'll be another thing to kind of look at. Jason Newman, I see your comment about Bubba's wreck avoidance in the race. Yeah, absolutely. I think he did a great job keeping his nose clean. He made a lot of great moves out there, like we saw out of him in the duels earlier this year. Remember, in the 500, he avoided that big wreck as well and was right in there. He was close enough to the lead to end up getting collected in that unfortunate wreck there with Keselowski and Logano at the end. No fault of his own, and I don't think undermines the great run he had up to that point. It would have been great to see Suarez back up there too. I don't know how he was able to get back up there with the damage that he had. And again, we talked about the great run that BJ McLeod had. I think it's a good effort for really all the big teams out there, certainly. On the same note here, with the 34 car in last place, and of course Bubba Wallace with a great run. Kudos to NASCAR for doing the segment there before the race where they awarded the trophy to Wendell Scott's family. As I've always said with Wendell Scott, I think that he is one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR history, not for simply the aspects of his life that do get talked about a lot, but for the fact that they really kind of underestimate more often than not the fact that he was really one of the best owner drivers of his time period. You talk about Jimmy Means talking about guys like Buddy Arrington later in the year. Even they had factory support and help from the Petties. Wendell Scott had none of that, and yet was still one of the most tenacious competitors out there. So anytime to see his name get mentioned out there, it's a win. Certainly not. For the most often discussed elements, of course, the racial component, the civil rights, and so forth, but also a win for the independents at the same time, which I think adds to it. I don't mean this to detract from it at all. I think it's another aspect to add on top of it there too. It's good to see Bubba Wallace get a good run on the same day as that and everything, and good to see the family out there. Long overdue, to say the least. Kind of surprised it didn't happen last year with all of what was going on last year. Seemed like a pretty obvious move. Of course, the best time would have been to give Scott the trophy back in 1963 in Jacksonville, but that's a story for a whole other day, and plenty of people have already put a lot of ground on that too there. So that's, of course, already covered. But yeah, and A79 IROC, I guess I will go into this more. That's a big issue there that you're bringing up here, A79 IROC. Yeah, that they were awarded a trophy. I really do want to kind of know what happened with the trophy that Buck Baker received that day. What happened to that? I don't know what's going on there. I'd be interested to know the story behind that, if that was even an option, or where it is. I don't know. I don't know if that was just if there was something going on behind the scenes there. I didn't hear anything about it. When I first heard this announcement, I was wondering if that was going to be the case because, again, it's strange. So again, it's a nice gesture, of course. And again, I don't want to go too far afield into this, but I mean, would it really have been that much harder to get the actual trophy? I think that would have been a lot more meaningful. Especially in the moment, and I don't like to be that way about a good gesture and a good gift and a good recognition again of that component and everything. And again, I don't want to go too far down the hill on that because I know there's a lot with that, but it's worth bringing up, of course, because it's important. It's important. It's important not just for the context of the times, but it's also important for of course, his accomplishments as an owner driver. Again, one thing I always point to, check out Perry Allen Wood's book, Declarations of Stock Car Independence. And it's no exaggeration. There's multiple independent drivers that are interviewed in this book back in, I think it was back in like 2008. And I'm really appreciative that he actually interviewed James Hilton. That's another person I wish I could have interviewed when he was still with us. Almost all of them in there had a story about how impressive Wendell Scott was as a driver. And nobody's saying anything about his race. Nobody's saying anything about anything like that. Not saying that it's anything that's, not saying that it's anything that shouldn't be discussed or anything like that. But it's in that case, and I just thought it was really interesting that, again, I think the greatest thing that you could say about a race car driver is that they're a racer and that they were one of the best guys out there. They were a tough competitor. Think back to Kenny Irwin's mentioned there with Ralph Shaheen in that clip we used in the 3 before February. Much the same case there. I think the best you could say is the driver was a racer, and maybe they had a lot more obstacles to overcome, or maybe more struggles along the way. But people said the same things about Wendell Scott. They said about Kenny Irwin and other competitors there. They were like, you know what? They had a lot of things to deal with, but man, on the racetrack there was nobody tougher. And I don't think that's just a mere platitude. I think there's so many guys out there that just never get talked about, that maybe only did a couple starts out there, even more drivers that ran for decades. I mean, heck, you don't have to hear that from me. I'm the guy that did the J.D. McDuffie book, for goodness sake. So, so there's that. Actually, this kind of dovetails into another subject here, actually, on this too. On the subject of drivers that really don't get talked about that much too. I have another video that I announced actually earlier during the Xfinity Series race here. It's not an episode of the Rise of the Field Fillers. That's still coming together here. I know it's been a long haul, but I've been working on getting some short form content out there because I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for that and try to kind of churn out some more content besides just these streams. The subject of the video is actually a driver that doesn't get talked about that much, that only made one Cup Series start. And I'm kind of looking at other similar stories from that side here. If you're already in the Patreon, I won't spoil the surprise here, so you can check out at patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. And if you're in the $5 and up level, you can have access to that video right now. I'll probably make it live tomorrow, so everybody else check it out there. I'm not going to do a premiere for it because it's a very short video compared to the 2-part Carl Long video, of course, in particular. But it's a shorter video, and so I'm just going to kind of post it there, and I'll, of course, have updates for that on the Twitter feed at Last Car on Brock. So stay tuned for more information on that at the same time. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably lost to time. I don't know. It would be interesting to see. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about. Again, there's so many artifacts of NASCAR that have been preserved, but there's other ones that that just make you wonder. I mean, I've always wondered about that wheel that came off J.D. McDuffie's car at Watkins Glen. It's out there somewhere. I don't know where it is. I've looked into other sources during the research for the book. I mentioned it in the book, even in the update of the book. I don't really have any new information on that. There's not much more information I have on that. I'd love to know where it is. I don't know if it's in somebody's yard or if it's just right outside the Watkins Glen property or whatever. But I put Wendell Scott's trophy in that category and other things from there. But I don't know. There's a lot of mysteries out there, but that's one of the, well, I was about to say one of the greatest things in the sport, but those two situations are not certainly, excellent moments. I mean, there's certainly, moments of tragedy in both cases, I would argue, different kinds of tragedy. But at the same time there, there's a lot of aspects of the sport that just don't get talked about. And you can look at the sport from any one direction and get so much more out of it, whether your focus is on teams or tracks or drivers or any kind of other aspect of it, pit crews, anything else. I sound like I'm reading off the categories of the trivia thing here, but it remains that those are all different aspects. You notice when we even do that, it kind of requires a different set of knowledge, and maybe some people can bring more to bear on one versus the other. So you kind of have that aspect too. So I don't know. I know Aishi is excited that Tyler Reddick made the playoffs, so there, congratulations on that. Yeah, again, great run by Reddick. He's had a very quietly good year this year. Really good at getting those stage points. Seemed like he had a good momentum going. It's good that he's made it. Certainly one of the big three from the Xfinity Series a couple years ago. Still trying to get that first win. Came so close to Texas. What was it, last year? To beating Austin Dillon out there. So we'll find out. But just look at the rest of the results here. Justin Haley in the 7th spot for the Cup Series race. Other competitors further back. Oh, we didn't even talk about Quinn Houff's situation. That was a very bizarre one at the start. I'll give you my side of it here from this because I was really trying to piece it together. At the very beginning of the race, when Anthony Alfredo had to come down pit road to serve his pass-through penalty, Quinn Houff was already coming down pit road at the same time. And actually, he was doing it so quickly that Alfredo was already moved up to the 39th spot, and Quinn Houff was already classified last at the end of the first lap. For that to happen, Houff would have had to drop off the pace like immediately after the start of the race, and even slower than Alfredo, who had actually pulled to the apron on the back straightaway. Houff apparently reported that there was a loud sound, a loud bang in his car. He wasn't sure what it was and pulled down pit road. It was very hard to discern exactly what the issue was. He was on pit road for a very long time. It was clear he wasn't in an accident because the crew was making it very clear that they weren't on the crash clock. They could keep working on the car. This went for several laps. They were talking about something about like a pin coming out of a loop or a pulley at some point. It was very hard to piece together, not really from radio traffic, not from static so much, from just like the little sentence fragments you kind of pick it up along the way. It sounded like it was an issue initially with the roof flaps because they were talking about roof flaps. That got mentioned a couple of times. And so that was the first report that I had. Now, again, of course, the roof flaps come up. They have tethers beneath them to keep them from going too far. Was there an issue where something got stuck in there? But I'm like, well, that's kind of a weird thing. I don't know how that would even show up, much less make a huge bang. It wasn't clear until much later because Starcom Racing and Quinn Houff's account weren't posting any updates for most of the time they were behind the wall, which is more than 20 laps. But thank you again to Starcom Racing for finally posting pictures that the roof hatch had actually come loose. And I don't know if it actually popped up all the way. It didn't come off because they were actually trying to get pry bars under it to get it back open. They're actually trying to get it working there. Something happened in the mechanism or something that came loose, and it forced them to pit road, and they checked it out, and they just couldn't get it figured out. Had issues with the roll cage at the same time. They kept talking about getting like a bungee cord or something to get it in there. Just crazy situation. There wasn't a constant stream of of traffic during that, just kind of bits here and there, as I guess you would expect. But a very unusual situation. I seem to remember Keselowski in the Xfinity race at Daytona a couple of years ago had an actually fell out of the race because of a roof hatch issue. In this case, at least from the pictures, it didn't seem like they actually had any damage to the roof or lost the panel. They had to reattach it there and get him back out there, which they ultimately did, and ultimately avoided finishing in last place by getting ahead of McDowell. With such low attrition in the opening laps, that was pretty much the only retiree we had until the wrecks started piling up towards the end, to the point that you have guys like William Byron, Landon Castle, and Kaz Gralla in the bottom five. Heartbreaker for Landon Castle as well. I haven't really mentioned him that much tonight. Seemed like I think he was about like 15th place when he got in the big wreck on the back straightaway. Had a great run there for the Gaunt brothers. I don't think the 96 cars looked that good in quite some time, regardless of who was driving it. They've had all kinds of different drivers run it. Great run there for the 96. Unfortunately, have just a bottom five run. Sounded like from the Twitter there that they're going to be running again at Talladega. I don't know if they're going to run with Castle or not. That'll be interesting to find out. I hope he gets another run because he had a good showing out there. Castle's probably one of the best talents out there in terms of like journeyman guys in the Xfinity series that doesn't yet have a full-time or at least part-time Cup effort out there. So it was good to see him actually get the opportunity. Sad that he couldn't get the good performance out there. Again, I'm still constantly impressed by what he did with Morgan Shepherd's team in the Xfinity series. That great run at Homestead still stands out to me from just a couple of years ago. And hopefully this is something that's kind of put him back on the radar screen, and for the good reason. So we'll find out on that end. You can't be stuck and not be able to open. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, A79, on that there for sure. Yeah, so yeah, there was all kinds of problems with that, but that was just a big mess up there at the end, or at the start, really. Kind of put him in a situation there. Let's see here. But yeah, last place battle. Again, engine failure for McDowell at the bottom of the field, 35 last place finishes unofficially in the results here. Quinn Houff still finishing under power despite the issue with the roof hatch. William Byron, Landon Castle, and Kaz Gralla rounding out the bottom five there in that one. We'll get into the Xfinity side for a bit here, and then we'll go into the trivia segment of here. A79 IROC, are you okay with me saying who you are? Because you are, I can give you a shout out if you like. This is definitely a big supporter of the site here for sure. But I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not cool with that. In the meantime, here I'll get the Xfinity results up here for you. Okay, so oh gosh. I'd almost forgotten completely until I looked at the results here. We talked about how great Brandon Brown's been doing, and unfortunately the situation for him in the race earlier today. I don't know what dark moon or whatever is over Brandon Jones right now. I know he drives for Joe Gibbs. I know people have different feelings. Just watch any, Kamikaze Games video or something out there to see that not everybody's a huge fan of Brandon Jones. But he has gone through so many struggles this year and so many early exits. Has a streak of races where he hasn't even completed the opening lap, and now has the lead in the 2021 NASCAR Xfinity Series standings with a second last place finish in 3 races following the Turn 6 incident back in Indianapolis that got several other drivers. Now in this one with an overheating engine while running among the leaders and dropping out after just 17 laps on this. So yeah. Yeah, man. Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you're cool with it, man, I'll just mention here. So A79 IROC, for those of you who don't know, this is Brian Hallman, who is a absolutely invaluable resource for Rise of the Field Fillers, and I definitely want to give him a shout out here for all the support he's given from his wonderful photography and unbelievable selection of pictures that he's collected over the many years there with that. So again, big thanks to you, Brian, there for all the contributions there to Rise of the Field Fillers. I mean, again, some of these incredible shots like Carl Long's career, Morgan Shepherd's, these other teams, and then there's certainly no exception with Andy Belmont. We just corresponded the other day, and a tremendous collection from his career here too, which I think is only going to help that video really come together. And I really enjoyed kind of having it kind of pull together with different eras in the sport and really different aspects of the sport there as well. So yeah, definitely kudos to you, Brian, there, and definitely check out the BRH Racing Archives there for more on that. If you have, I don't know if you have a link or anything on that there, but definitely mention that there at the same time there. But fantastic work there. Again, it's especially these days when you're putting these videos together, it's so hard to come up with good visuals sometimes to really kind of tie everything together. I know there's a lot of people who use stock images and things like that. Really doing these kind of historical videos, I can't express like how much it helps to have that kind of content out there. And you can really learn a lot from some of these pictures, like what sponsors supported the teams, what kind of cars they ran, and really get a good look at it. And they just look good. They just look great in the HD there in the video too. So again, kudos to Brian Hallman. Definitely look him up here for more of his work as well, and make sure you support him too, because he does great work out there. So definitely kudos there. I do great work. Well, thank you very much. I like to do the very best I can with that too, and it's definitely very much appreciated. So looking at the Xfinity results here, the story of the 3 colleague cars, you had a situation where I guess this was inevitable at some point, where a couple of years ago in the summer race, I believe it was, the colleague cars all ran over each other and almost took each other completely out of contention to actually win a race. You had other situations where they were trying to get a top 3 finish and one of the cars was disqualified. And now we get a situation where all 3 cars almost had a 3-wide battle for the lead. One of them was just edged by Justin Allgaier by the finish there, with Jeb Burton finishing 1-2-4, dominating this. If there's any question that colleague racing is the dominant force in the Xfinity series on the super speedways, I think that effectively ended earlier today with the finish that we saw out there. Those guys are just, trophy hunting is almost too much of a euphemism at this point. These guys are just out for keeps, and I think they're going to be very tough next year. It's going to be very tough to get used to the Cup Series next gen car. They're going to have the same challenge to work with there, but they're going big. They're going just as big as Trackhouse has been going here with their own expansion to 2 cars, and 2311 now expanding to 2 cars as well. The face of team ownership in NASCAR is changing, and as much as I'm not a big fan of losing teams, I am certainly a huge fan of new teams coming in and seeing what they can do and trying to match up against a lot of the greats. That's where great storylines come in. This is another one to certainly look at here. Certainly colleague racing in very short order. Check out Ben Schneider's feature on Last Car here that he just did a while back after Indy. In very short time, has gone from just a sponsor of Blake Cook's effort for TriStar Motorsports to being a standalone team with multiple cars and are just a crime syndicate out there. You watch one of those black and white cars come out there, you better watch out, because they're going to be just as tough as ever. Now, this, of course, raises the question of team orders in NASCAR, which I'm also not really a big fan of. And much like the race earlier tonight, you kind of take the good with the bad at the same time. You had a great finish, competitive race, relatively clean race, besides a few incidents along the way. Not really crazy about a situation saying like, oh, okay, well here, make sure it's one thing if you have like a situation where it's like, okay, well, make sure it's at least one of you guys that win. I think at the end of the day, that kind of team orders have been around since really the start of having multi-car teams in NASCAR. You can think of Hendrick Motorsports at one point, Joe Gibbs Racing, any of these other programs. I think where it gets tricky is when it comes to the point of almost manipulating the outcome of a race. And there's a narrow line there between actually being competitive and stifling competition. It's one thing if you have the 3 best cars and you're just out there and you're beating them by a lap and a half, and that's okay. That's one thing that happens. You can't help it. That kind of racing just doesn't exist these days. So now you have a situation where you're basically holding up all 3 lines of a super speedway finish, and you know that one of them is going to win, that it's impossible for any of them not to win in that case, unless they just all completely wad each other up, which I guess could have happened in this case, but I don't know. The same thing could have been said of Joe Gibbs a couple of years ago, or Hendrick further back, I guess. But And I guess it's probably jealousy at the same time, too, that they have this 3-car program and seems so clearly the big fish in the small pond at the super speedways. But again, they are looking to go bigger and better, and they're already looking into the Cup Series. And I'm sure other teams that have been trailing them on the super speedways, including Toyota, that has now had an even longer time not winning on the super speedways, which is kind of surprising, really, if you think about it, are kind of looking at that differently. But again, credit where credit's due in that sense, and a big weekend for Colleague Racing, and I know that they're just as amped as ever, and it's good to see, and a lot of emotion out of Justin Haley too. I know that Haley is comes off kind of quiet a bit. At least I know from my own interview with him, he kind of came off a little bit that way. I just kind of took that just being focused. For example, I was speaking to him in 2019 after he won the race in July, not right after. This was at Phoenix, of course, later in the year. But he didn't want to talk about the Cup Series at all. He wanted to just be completely focused on the Xfinity Series. And at this time, the Phoenix race wasn't the finale, and he wasn't one of the final 4 in that equation. He just wanted to focus, even then, on doing the best that he could to get to the next round if he could. And that was just kind of the focus that he had. So it was good to see, maybe a bit more, emotion out of him in this sense here. I like to see when a win means a lot to somebody. I think that, there's some times where a driver gets a whole lot of wins and you kind of sense that they're kind of going through the motions after a while, but that it means something to them, but you just don't see it. I mean, you don't really have to expect that somebody's going to be like AJ Allmendinger, just go hopping all over the place all the time. But I kind of like to think that it's still something pretty special. There was, I'll give you a little preview here with the Andy Belmont video. When I was talking with him for the interview that is going to be a big part of this video, actually, as a matter of fact, on top of Brian's pictures, of course, he was saying that no matter when it was that he was going to a racetrack and strap it in, whether it was, Darlington or Daytona or wherever, knowing that he was one of only the 40 cars that was out there, even knowing that he was probably only going to beat 1 or 2 of those cars in some cases, it just meant the world to him. It was like the Super Bowl, and it was something that, was just tremendously important to him. And that's just for somebody at the back of the field. Imagine somebody that's able to win a race. You'd like to believe that they would mean that much to them, and you would be able to see it in that sense. And that was very much the case with Belmont. It's something that he still kept with him, the efforts that he's had since then. But you'll see more of that when episode 8 is actually completed, coming up here very soon. Actually, this afternoon between the 2 races, I actually got some good work on the script done. And there's much more to go here, but I think we're getting really close along the way to something that's going to be pretty good here. Confirmation 07, thank you for the super chat there for sure. Playoffs and motorsports is nonsense. That is all. I agree. Full season championships, I think, are much more compelling. I think they much more naturally create great storylines. I think every race becomes more important because any one race can cause, a huge kerfluffle or not. And you could have a narrative that naturally builds up from one moment to the next. So I think that's a much more exciting way to go. And yeah, I'm with you there. Confirmation. That's really been the big thing too. Kudos also. I know you and I have talked back and forth here outside the chat here too. Kudos to your guy Bubba Wallace there on the great finish. Great third place run here pending post-race inspection. So we'll find out what happens. Maserati 9, yeah, you're hitting it on the head too. Yeah, NASCAR's trying to do 1992 every year. That's what makes 1992 special. It didn't happen every year. It's just the year before, Dale Earnhardt and Ricky Rudd basically both kind of didn't seem to want the point lead. Neither of them were the most dominant driver out there, but they seemed to capitalize when everybody else struggled. And that's where the championship came down to the two of them. I think it was actually a trivia question last week. So that's kind of how that worked out. So there's that one too. So let's see. So let me get this here. We'll jump into our trivia thing here too. If you guys have any other questions on anything from both the races we haven't talked about, I feel like I've just kind of skirted a couple of these here. On the Xfinity side, kudos to JJ Yaley, bringing in a new sponsor, the Figures Wireless car on the Chevrolet there. Great run there from the 34th spot to 13th. David Starr in the 14th spot there, ran double duty today, both races. Great run there for him in the number 61 car. And right behind him, Jason White and Ryan Sieg were really getting a good run going there between the two of them there in the 15th and 16th spot there further back. Some good runs further back. I thought Yaley was actually going to have a good shot at a top 10 finish and had a good run going there for Rick Ware's team. Would have been a great way to pair it up, of course, with the 11th place run that Josh Balicki had today. So great effort that they had on that. So kudos to all of them. And good to see new sponsors come in there as well to back up all these different teams. So certainly exciting to see. Okay, so whoop, did I get retweeted on something here? Let's see. Seeing if something else on the we haven't heard from inspection yet, have we? I imagine it's gonna be a pretty long night on that. Oh no, never mind. Kudos also. I want to mention also while we're mentioning other people, Michael Juskowitz did a wonderful drawing. Hand drawing of BJ McLeod's 78 car that he ran tonight. One of the best paint schemes they've had this year. And they've had a lot of really good ones on that 78. They don't get seen enough on camera. I don't think tonight's got seen at all, which is a crying shame. Oh gosh, now I'm stumbling. Was it a crocodile or an alligator? It was one or the other. Looked great on there. The green scales. Juskowitz did a great drawing. He was the same one that did the JD McDuffie drawing that was featured on here a while back as well. Very talented artist. And definitely check out his account, Michael Juskowitz on Twitter there for that. Oh my goodness, Tyler Reddick retweeting pictures of his car that got through to the playoffs here, Kyle Larson style. So kudos to him on that as well. All righty. So let's see here. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and do the I have something for show and tell tonight. I made sure not to lose that. Definitely want to make sure to give a shout out to Brad Perez wearing his shirt tonight. Figured I'd premiere that this evening for the night race here in Daytona. I'm glad that this is actually helping him hopefully get another ARCA start very soon after the great showing that he had at Watkins Glen. So definitely check out his account. Brad Perez on Twitter. I think it's Brad X Perez, if I remember correctly. Great guy. Love running into him at the tracks there. Looking forward to seeing him and the Rackley War team over in Las Vegas here coming up next month. My goodness, it's coming up just a couple weeks. So we're going to get that going here too. Oh, any dogs this week? I should have brought Frenchie up here. My other dog, the dog I brought up last week, Frankie. For those of you that were at the late of the show, that's my father's dog. The dog that I've kind of taken care of for my mom now that we picked up these puppies lately. We got 4 now that are running all over the place. The 2 puppies would not sit still in here. They would probably knock this camera over here in the meantime. They got so much energy. But Frenchie would probably sit right here. He's about half the size of the dog that I had last week. If I hear him scratching at the door, I'll bring him up here. But otherwise, we'll bring him up either in, maybe our Darlington show here coming up in the meantime. So let's see here. All right. It's kind of late at night here for Frenchie. He might be asleep here at the same time. All righty. So again, for our picks for the categories here, this is again the late 90s Trivial Pursuit NASCAR deal here. So we're going to do some questions here to wrap up the show for this evening. Categories again are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are the categories. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are our categories here for tonight. Tonight's beverage, a little bit different. They ran out of Code Red at our local supermarket. So tonight is Country Time Strawberry Lemonade is the beverage. And it does not have the caffeine that I need to be on edge enough for this. I feel it not given the same buzz that I'm used to here, but hopefully we'll find more in the near future. We were shopping for this afternoon. They ran out. It's pretty good though. Not bad. Always partial to Country Time because of the Neil Bonnet sponsorship. Of course there. So we got that this week. All righty. So anyway, while the categories come in, and Beast of Metal, I'll have you go ahead and keep score on that. If you could, we'll do our show and tell segment this week. So going back to February this year. Now, of course, back at Daytona, one of the stories that I know a lot of people want to know my thoughts on, of course, was the last place finish of Derek Cope after a very frustrating week in Speed Weeks at Daytona during that weekend there. And what that resulted in, of course, the incident that happened on the third lap of the race, driving the number 15 car that was actually a Starcom car, entered under Rick Ware's effort there, was a last place finish in the Daytona 500 and his first Daytona 500 start since 2004. One thing that was interesting that was a result of that day is that Derek Cope, other than his win in the Daytona 500, never finished better than 18th in that race. He did have 2 finishes better than 18th in the July race, but neither of those were top 10s, if I remember correctly. I'm saying, again, I was trying to do this from memory, but I'm going to pull that up just to make sure. I don't believe either of those were top 10s. I think they were like 11th and 14th. So I will pull that up here to make sure. I'm sure somebody in the comment section will already have seen this here. But this has a direct relevance here to what I'm going to discuss here in just a moment. So that's an interesting thing. So he certainly never had in our top 5 in the Daytona 500. And yes, it is showing 26 starts at Daytona and just 1 top 5 and 1 top 10. So yes, those were not top 10 runs in the July race. He finished 13th in the July race in 1995, and he finished 17th in the July race in 1991. The second best finish that Cope had in the Daytona 500 was driving this car right here, the Jimmy Dean sausage car fielded by the Bahari Racing Team, which actually at the time was about to become Eel River Racing under team owner Jack Birmingham. And it was running this same paint scheme. So this was the second best car or second best finish that Cope had in the Daytona 500, including this year, including his run for Arnold Motorsports in 2004 that was featured in Rise of the Field Fillers, and even further back to Fenley Motor Motorsports in 2000. This was in 1999 that he ran this paint scheme. And one thing that was interesting with this one, I distinctly remember when they released diecast of these cars, because what happened was the partnership that he had back then, you could see it a little bit on this little hauler. I'm not sure if it shows up very well on camera, but you got that there, that it had 4 different paint schemes representing 4 different companies from the parent company that was sponsoring the car back then. And most diecast companies had at least the other 3, the State Fair Corn Dogs car, the Brian Foods car, and the Rudy's Farm, the white car. And even though the white car, I think, only ran like once or twice in that. But for some reason, this one was always impossible to find. And I kind of forgotten about that over the years. And I found this one on eBay, and I had to pull the trigger on it there because I saw that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was just a great paint scheme. It actually had more of a gold tinge to it. These Hot Wheels ones that they made in the late 90s kind of experimented with the color a bit more. This looks more like a lime green, almost yellowish color here. But still a great paint scheme. They kind of use the same base coat and kind of a precursor to a lot of paint schemes you see today. I mean, how many teams now? It's pretty much everybody. They run like, similar base coat, but completely different sponsors. And then other times where they just don't even keep the base coat the same and they change it up. This was probably one of the first precursors in the modern era, and that's dating back all the way back to 1999. And again, Derek's second best finish in the Daytona 500. Bahari, was there ever a team more cursed with bad luck than you? Yeah, I would have to say at the same time there. So there's that for sure. But I always liked this one. The Jimmy Dean paint scheme I thought was kind of a neat shot there. But again, it ran more of as a gold colored paint scheme, but diecast of it, again, for whatever reason. And I always thought this was the primary one because this one was the one they ran at Daytona. And, I remember back in that time period, I always thought whatever they ran at Daytona, that's supposed to be the primary scheme. Things change so much now. You probably can't even a lot of the schemes that ran at Daytona this year, they probably haven't run even since then. We haven't seen Suarez run the iFly paint scheme since then, if I remember correctly. So that just shows how much that's changed. But kind of a little bit in the time tunnel there. I like these little war wagons they kind of made back then too. So that was kind of a neat deal. So maybe this is something that'll make a comeback someday, and who knows on that end. But definitely wanted to show that for show and tell segment this week. Yeah, Hot Wheels. Yeah, they had some good ones. One problem I had with Hot Wheels back then, I had a Darrell Waltrip one that was from that same time, and they didn't have a clear coat on it, So it smudged really easy. The oil on your fingers would smudge it wouldn't smudge the paint, like smear it around, but it would just get a really dirty look really easy. And I don't know if it was just that one car that ended up that way. It was a Darrell Waltrip one for like 99, the big Kmart car. And it just wasn't that good. So I hope that's not the case with this one. I'm probably going to just keep it as is there with that. But yeah, that was a big issue with that. I don't know if that was more of an epidemic with the other schemes that they had back then, the other cars, but that one stands out to me. I should bring that out for a show and tell too, because that was just kind of a thing. But yeah, that was a big. Okay, I'm seeing some yeahs in the comment. Okay, was that an issue too? I don't even know, but I remember that really irritated me because Racing Champions didn't have that problem, and Winner's Circle didn't have that problem. They were the other two big sales there. I mean, Hot Wheels after 99, 2000, they got better and they clear coated theirs and it was a lot better. But yeah, that's one that kind of comes to mind. Let's see. What do we got here for? Oh, Faygo Red Pop. I don't know if I've tried that. That would be probably pretty good. Anything cherry is pretty good. I've always been kind of a sucker for that. I was actually kind of, they had like the I liked it when they did the cherry vanilla Coke. Obviously, you can get that most anywhere these days, but yeah, that would kind of be the other part of it. Goodness. Oh, Savola Brothers. Yeah, that'd be another good team. Okay. Where are we on the tally here? I'm seeing a couple for tracks. Sundrop. Oh, yeah. Sundrop's good. Yeah, good call, Brian. Yeah, that's a really good one. Big Red's okay. I tried that in Texas. That one. Some of them taste like just like a popsicle. It's melted, which sounds delicious at first, but I mean, I kind of, it doesn't. I don't know. It's a toss up. It's not bad. Big Red's kind of like that to me. The soda, not the gum. But Sundrop is underrated. Yeah, I think it's a good candidate. All right. Let's see. Where are we on tracks? You got 1, 2. I think we're 3. I'd say it's red flavor, like how grape candy is described as purple. Yeah, that's fair. I know a lot of people don't like grape because it tastes like medicine, and I think some people don't like cherry for the same reason. I don't know. I grew up, I remember taking Dimetap as a kid, and it had that grape flavor, but that never really kind of dissuaded me from grape flavored things. Usually those are pretty good. Actually, like some of the sodas, or you remember Squeeze-Its? I'm really dating myself now. I remember like the drinks, not Kool-Aid Jammers. The precursor was Squeeze-Its, and they had like faces molded in these little plastic bottles and the little tab on top. You would, oh gosh, that's how you get a hairline like this. You break that off there, and oh man, those were good. I'm probably still carrying a lot of that around today, but those were good. Those are almost like, at least I seem to remember them being that way. The Kool-Aid ones came out afterwards, and they didn't have the faces on the bottles. Like there was kind of a degree of separation. I mean, they weren't bad, but I mean, they weren't the same as the Squeeze-Its. And that was like late 80s. I'm thinking 89, 90, thereabouts. Probably about the time that Coke won the first 500. So that would be kind of they brought Dunkaroos back. I don't know if they brought Squeeze-Its back. I haven't even looked. That would probably be another thing. So yeah. Okay, wild card gets tied with tracks. Okay, I'm seeing a couple for wild card joining in. Okay, so we'll do wild card here, and we'll jump into that. I think we're up to a wild card category tonight. Ooh, here we go. How many NASCAR Winston Cup events did Darrell Waltrip win from 1993 through 1997? How many NASCAR Winston Cup events did Darrell Waltrip win from 1993 to 1997? We just talked about Darrell Waltrip, so now we got that. 1993 to 1997. Goodness. Let's look at those pictures there again of Reddick's car. Alrighty. All right, we got to see a lot of zeros on here. Uh-oh, Steven C knows what I'm talking about with the Squeeze-Its. There you go. 1-0 and everything. Okay, here we go. How many NASCAR Winston Cup events did Darrell Waltrip win from 1993 to 1997? The answer is indeed 0. He won his last 2 races in 1992. Bristol, and our venue next week, the Southern 500 in September. So there we go. 0 is indeed the answer. Came very close a number of times. You think about the times with DEI. You think about his last top 5, which is Sears Point in 1997. At least last top 5 with Darwall Enterprises, at least. So a great run there. 1993 at Atlanta, the season finale. I believe he almost won that on fuel mileage. Had some good runs at Indianapolis. Of course, the pole in the 2000 Brickyard 400 comes to mind, but not another victory after 1992. 92 comes up as a big theme in a lot of these here. Oop, hang on. We got the next question here. Switch categories here. Let me get that. Okay, here we go. What city saw Jeff Gordon compete in his first organized quarter midget race? What city saw Jeff Gordon compete in his first organized quarter midget race? Back to back. Oh, yeah, I guess it was. I didn't even think about that. There you go, Brian. Yeah, right on. Dunkaroos is a cereal? Oh, my God. Do they put like a frosting packet in there? Like you just use that instead of milk? That sounds good, but disgusting at the same time. I don't know how that's possible. I don't even know what you would call that. I mean, there's Oreo cereal. I mean, there's a roommate. Last had a roommate where he said like, "Oh man, I had Reese's for breakfast and not even the cereal." Like he just literally put peanut butter cups in a bowl and put milk on it, and that was breakfast. I hate to know what lunch is. What city saw Jeff Gordon compete in his first organized quarter midget race? We got Bakersfield, Lafayette, Winchester, Indy, South Bend, Riverside, L.A. Several guesses. I can't believe I don't know this, being a huge Jeff Gordon fan. I don't either. I don't know this is not really a Jeff Gordon fan. So that would make 2 of us. What city saw Jeff Gordon compete in his first organized quarter midget race? The answer is Sacramento, not far from Last Car headquarters right here. Sacramento is the correct answer. Right here in Northern California. I was kind of thinking Indy. Those of you guys guessing Indianapolis seemed right. Happy Wrenching, getting questions on how is Unheralded coming along. Going along fine. I actually just, did I have, okay. I got some other research material actually on Unheralded. Let me do this, a little twofer for our show and tell segment. It's right behind the camera and I can't quite reach it from here. So let me see if I can do this without knocking all this over. Let's find out. Okay, have I unplugged it yet? Nope, not yet. Let's try it there. And here. Okay. All right. Leap of faith. Here we go. There we go. All right. We're back. Here's another one I picked up for the Cope book. I just picked this up on a while back here. Daytona used to issue these books like this, called The Men and Machines of Speed Weeks 1990. These are great books. There's a lot of these on eBay and actually not for too expensive. I had one of these already from 1991. What's great about this is this does a full chronicle of every event during Speed Weeks and includes pictures of every driver in the starting lineup. Has some good features on other drivers from the lineup. So absolutely invaluable for adding some more context to the Derek Cope book. So this is the latest one. I haven't yet added it into the book yet, some material from it, but I certainly anticipate doing so after looking through this here. I'll give you a few shots here of some of the material that we have in here. For example, I'll take a look at Jimmy. Oh, hang on. Let me get the cover here. Jimmy Spencer, back when he was driving for Rod Osterland, before Osterland came back into the Cup Series. You get pictures like this. I mean, they're really nice productions. Like, it's not like UMI's one for the year in review books, but they made these just for Daytona. Like, I don't know if they do this anymore with McDowell. I mean, I haven't seen any of these that's like newer than 1994, but they're all like great features of these. Like, they have some interesting ones. So yeah, no, there's more coming on the Cope book. I'm adding more layers of paint to it here for sure. There's actually another interview I'm holding out for to try to get to kind of put a bow on it. Somebody I was told I need to speak to. One of the Kohler brothers, actually. I'll go ahead and just say, there's no mystery to it. I spoke with one of the Kohler brothers, who's the co-owners of Derek Cope's, the Starcom Fiber Company. That's actually part of Starcom Racing, of course, and they're big Derek Cope supporters. And I talked with Matt Kohler, and he said, "Boy, you got to talk to my brother. He's an even bigger Cope fan." So I'm trying to get a hold of him. That was one of the calls I was making this week. Haven't heard back yet. Oh, here we go. There's the man himself. So there we go. Look at that. I mean, there's the glory shot there of the Whitcomb racing car. So you got that. So and there's some good articles in here. I think Tom Higgins wrote a piece in this. There might be Steve Wade's material in here. There's a feature on the Days of Thunder effort. Let's see what we got. Where's something really good here? Oh, here we go. These are some good shots. How about these? Here's ones from Pit Road. Check that out. Kind of got these here from talk about Pit Road being a busier place. This is the last year before they. Well, I mean, I guess they didn't have pit speed at 91 either. They did the stickers, the odd and even cars there. Richard Petty had a good qualifying run. Unfortunately, got some damage to the nose of the car there. So that was a whole other thing there. Let's see. But yeah, there's a feature. Okay, there's a feature here on Cope by Tom Higgins, and I think Steve wrote something in here. No, Mike Harris did a feature on. There we go. It's a feature on Days of Thunder. Check this out. This got the interesting thing there, showing Tom Cruise walking down what looks to be, I believe, there's Ken Reagan's car in the foreground and Rich Bickles in front of him, and then the Group 44 car, which I believe was Jim Sauter that year. So this is, I think, the duels, and you got Tom Cruise in the middle of the shot there. So again, great features on this. These books, if you're interested in one of these here, this is a nice hardcover here. I think it was previously owned by a library, so they put this kind of clear sheet over it. But they're nice volumes. So if you're interested in like classic racing and you want to know more little details from what happened in a given speed weeks, definitely look these up. You can certainly do worse than that. Again, I haven't seen anything. I don't think I've seen one earlier. I think they're like 89 to 94, which is pretty much the golden age in my mind for a lot of this. Those are ones to certainly look up. So this is the latest one that I'm pulling information from to add to the Cope book. So a little behind the scenes on that there too. Yes. Oh, thank you for addressing that there, Beast of Metal. Yes, I saw the question there too for Wyatt O'Quinn, number 5 there. Yeah. So that is the plan there. The next episode of Rise of the Field Fillers is still in script production at the moment. I would say the script is probably about 50 to 60% complete. I made some good progress on it today. There's just a lot of detail in here. But luckily, a lot of the heavy lifting is done. Transcribing the interview and getting the transcription set up, that was a big part because I had like 3 hours of material, which is great. You think Ronnie Thomas talking on the Scene Vault podcast gave a lot of information. Andy Belmont gave a tremendous amount, and it was all like great stuff. It's like, oh man, I got to use this. Oh, I got to use this. There's not much getting left on the cutting room floor on this one. But luckily that part is done. So now it's just a matter of getting the script put together. I got some other articles put together on this too, and hopefully get that set up here pretty soon. But I'm looking to do some other short videos in the meantime, because it's been this time between June, beginning of June when the Carl Long video posted, and now has gone by so quickly. Basically the first part of it was updating the JD book and doing the audio book. That took way longer than it really needed to. And since then, it's been a matter of catching up on that. Both the Derek Cope project and Rise of the Field Fillers. So we're clear of that log jam. We're getting there now. So we'll have some more information on that. Definitely for more information on that, check out both the Patreon at patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock, as well as the Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock. So check that out as well. Oh yeah, Andy Belmont's awesome. Again, every person I've talked to on this project, I mean, I'm glad I was able to get interviews for a lot of these. Unfortunately, I didn't get to talk to Kirk Shelmerdine directly face to face, but there was some great interviews that I could pull up on that. But then starting with, I guess it was Dean Arnold was the first one for the Arnold Motorsports episode. I talked to him right before Thanksgiving break. I know people were saying like, "Oh, he sounds really relaxed on the phone." That was why. It was like the day before Thanksgiving break, and I'm sure he was on vacation already. So I really appreciate him taking the time. We spoke for maybe like most of what was that interview was in the video. So it was just briefly, like 20 minutes or so, but he gave some great information that I think kind of set the series on the right trajectory. And that's certainly going to continue in this one. And the episode's coming after. This isn't going to be the last one. And you'll have more information on that very soon as well. So we'll do a couple more trivia questions here and then probably wrap up for tonight. I appreciate you guys sticking with me here. I know it's past, oh gosh, it's 9:44 here on the West Coast. So I know we're well past midnight on the East Coast. We'll just do a couple questions here, and then I don't want to keep you guys up entirely too late. But I do appreciate you guys sticking with me here on an evening here tonight. So next question here. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with Pearson? Let me read that one again. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with Pearson? It's interesting how that's worded, isn't it? You would presume David Pearson. I think most people would. I don't think it's a Larry Pearson question unless it's going into suddenly uber hard mode here. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with Pearson is the question. Happy wrenching. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the J.D. McDuffie book. I'm also very thankful to everybody that's checked out the audiobook as well. I have that's been up there. People have been picking that up, and I really appreciate that as well. The offer still stands. If you are somebody that has the audiobook from Waldorf Publishing and you weren't satisfied with it, or you'd like to have both versions of the audiobook, let me know. Send me an email with your receipt. You can block out the address and all that. If you need to do that, that's fine. I totally understand that, of course. But just proof of purchase, basically. And then I'll send you a code there so you can get the new version of the audiobook for free. So that offer's still on the table. Haven't really had that many pick up on that. But I do appreciate people picking it up. But that offer's still on the table. They have a limited number of codes, so just be clear on that. But I do have some codes. So just to let you know. And that's for US and UK sales only. They don't generate codes for other ones, at least not at the moment. So I apologize. I know we have people in Brazil and Chile and Australia and stuff that poke in here, even Canada that show it here too. Even Canada, like it's further away. No, but Canada too. For some reason, I don't know why they don't have Canadian codes, but that's where we are on that. But we'll certainly work that out as well there for you. So again, the question is, who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with Pearson? That is her question. Roberts, Neaum Bonnet, Tiny Lund. Hey there from North Wilkesboro, SS Moke D01. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you here on this late Saturday or early Sunday morning, I guess, in your case. So, yeah. All righty. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with Pearson? The answer is Jim Hunter. Jim Hunter is the answer. NASCAR's Jim Hunter, I believe. Must be. Jim Hunter is the correct answer. Did anybody get that? I don't think anybody did. I was thinking a Richard Petty question. Jim Hunter is the question, is the answer. Yeah, I don't think anybody got that. E came close. You picked E. I'm seeing R's. That's okay. All right. Ooh, here we go. Here's an open wheeler question. I guess we saved this one from Indy a couple weeks ago. What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? What real first name, don't look it up, did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? There you go. There you go. There's a hard one. At least for me, I have no clue. That's not my area of expertise. NASCAR man would probably know that. And again, it always feels like a Spider-Man movie. No, that's a different person. That's not me. I could barely keep my Twitter account going. I certainly can't do two. So, yeah. Let's see. Another good picture for Josh Balicki 7 minutes ago, posting him standing next to the 52 car. Are you kidding me? P11 at Daytona in the NASCAR Cup Series. What an incredible job by my entire Rick Ware Racing team. New personal and team best finish, 52 car. Again, how many broadcasts have we seen where the 52 car has been just, unfortunately having to get out of the way of the leaders and finishing races lap down? That's one of the great things with super speedways. They giveth and they taketh away. And in this particular case, good to see the 52 car come out on top, especially on a difficult night for all three of his teammates, quite honestly. I can't overstate that, and I'm sure the team can't either. All right, that one's for Rufus, Jim, Daryl, Percy. Robin Miller used to call him Rufus. Well, hey, I would go with that. What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? Again, man. I hate that I never even got to go to. I never even been to Indianapolis before. While we, still had Bob Jenkins and Robin Miller. Those are shoes that both shoes are going to be entirely too big to fill. I mean, really. I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, people will come close. Every generation reinvents itself. I mean, you never know, but who knows? What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? The answer is indeed Rufus. You guys got it. Robin Miller, you were right, buddy. Rufus is indeed the correct answer. Papa Dragon 69, I think you were the first one on that. Jonathan Green, you got it there from that one. So I have no idea, but I'm going to go with Henry. Yep, there you go. Yep, Henry's a good guess. It sounds kind of an old school name, but Rufus is the correct answer. Alrighty. Okay. So last question for tonight. I know it's been a long haul here. We'll go ahead and do one more here in the meantime, and then we'll wrap up for this evening. So here's the last question for tonight. What's depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? Think about that. What is depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? So a very 1990s kind of question. So really think about that one there. It could be, okay, just think about it. What's depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? Is our question. Last question for tonight. Yeah, chicken wings, Kawiki, a peach, globe, an owl. I'll wait for a few more guests to come in because this is really an open-ended one. I mean, what's confusing me on this one is it's worded so briefly that I'm thinking, okay, are we talking the actual trophy? Are we talking a rendering of it? Because I think I know the answer to that one if it's a rendering of it. If it's the actual trophy, well, I guess it wasn't the Hooters 500 trophy, though. So that would be different. So that's probably not what they're talking about. But yeah, that would be the thing. Tank top, a wing, a miniature Hooters sign. Chris Drager. I figured you were going to get me a confusing name at some point, Beast of Metal. What's depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? Answer coming right up. Coming right up before we get to 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern here. Wasn't it in Atlanta? Got to say it like the guy in Honest Trailers. I can't pull the bass that low. To say stairs or boobs. There you go. Oh, goodness. Alan Quickie with a wreath around his head. I mean, these are all good guesses. Okay, here we go. You guys give up? The answer is coming up here. What's depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? The answer is an owl. An owl. Oh, my goodness. Northwest Cup Series. You got it right under the line there. An owl. A79 IROC. Of course, Brian, you got it. You're the first one to it, I think. Right on. So you got it, Brian, and then there you go. An owl is the correct answer. Northwest Cup Series, you got it too. Yeah. So, I mean, I was thinking, the example I was thinking of, there's a drawing, I'm sure it was Sam Bass that did it, of Kawiki winning the championship with the Underbird and the Winston Cup. And that one had a rendering of Mighty Mouse on the cup, but that was the Winston Cup. That wasn't the Hooters 500 one. So in a glass bust, it does have an owl. So it has the actual logo for Hooters in there. So that'll be the last question for this evening. So thank you again so much, everyone, for tuning in here tonight. And I just want to say this here to wrap up that, again, this isn't a news show. I try to keep the hard stuff kind of out of this, because I know this is kind of an escape for everybody. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention, what's happened in the news this week over in Afghanistan and our people stuck behind enemy lines. I just wanted to make sure that I say that, we're all pulling for you. We're hoping for the best. And God bless our troops and everything that they can do over there in an impossible circumstance there. And we certainly hope for the best possible outcome, and thoughts certainly, especially with the families affected from everything this past week there too. A lot that they're certainly dealing with. So I invite you to, everybody's keeping in mind, it's always been out there, of course. Thought about mentioning it in last week's show. Wasn't sure, but now, obviously, it's worth mentioning here, at least in passing. So I know it's not a hard news show or anything like this on here. But when certainly something of that nature comes up, be remiss not to mention it there. So, but again, wishing you all the best, of course, as well. Hope you have a great week. Have a safe week. And we'll see you back next week. Our next show is going to be after the Southern 500 on Labor Day weekend, hopefully this coming Sunday night. And we'll do another evening show here and check it out. So stay safe, everyone, and take care out there.